The Devil's Alliance, Hitler's Pact with Stalin by Roger Moorhouse is a compelling examination of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, a non-aggression agreement signed between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union in August 1939. This alliance, forged in the shadow of the impending Second World War, is often viewed as one of the most extraordinary and cynical episodes of the 20th century. Moorhouse's book sheds new light on this event, providing detailed insight into the motivations behind the pact, the personalities involved, and the far-reaching consequences that shaped the course of history. Background and context. The Nazi-Soviet Pact was signed in the days leading up to the outbreak of World War II. Europe had been in turmoil for over a decade, with the rise of Adolf Hitler and his aggressive expansionist ambitions threatening peace. Hitler's invasion of Poland in 1939 would be the spark that ignited the conflict. But before launching his attack, he needed to ensure that the Soviet Union would remain neutral. The USSR under Joseph Stalin was similarly concerned about Germany's rise and sought to protect itself from the looming threat. In the early 1930s, the idea of a German-Soviet partnership seemed unimaginable. The Nazis, led by Hitler, were virulently anti-communist, while Stalin's Soviet Union was anathema to Nazi ideology. However, by the late 1930s, both regimes found themselves in need of a strategic alliance, albeit for different reasons. Hitler was preparing for war in Europe and needed to secure his Eastern Front, while Stalin was seeking to buy time for military and industrial buildup, following the disastrous purges of the late 1930s that had weakened the Red Army. The negotiations. Moorhouse highlights the surprising diplomatic maneuvering that led to the pact. The negotiations were conducted in utmost secrecy, with both sides being highly cautious about revealing their true intentions. The German and Soviet foreign ministers Vyacheslav Molotov and Joachim von Ribbentrop were the primary figures involved in the talks. Molotov, a staunch Stalinist, and Ribbentrop, a Nazi loyalist, were both highly suspicious of one another, yet they recognized the pragmatic benefits of cooperation. The negotiations were driven by mutual distrust, yet there was a shared understanding that neither side could afford to fight a two-front war. Stalin, having watched the West's appeasement of Hitler and the failure of attempts to form a collective security arrangement, saw the pact as a way to ensure Soviet security. Hitler, meanwhile, saw the non-aggression agreement as a means of avoiding a conflict on the Eastern Front while focusing on Western Europe. Moorhouse explains how the Nazis and Soviets even agreed on the division of Eastern Europe, an area of significant geopolitical interest for both powers. In the secret protocol of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, Germany and the Soviet Union divided Poland, with the Nazis taking the western half and the Soviets controlling the east. This division would lead to the dismemberment of Poland shortly after the signing of the pact, and both powers would engage in military operations in the region. The Pact's ideological paradox. One of the most striking elements of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact was its ideological contradiction. The Nazis were vehemently opposed to communism, while Stalin's Soviet Union was based on Marxist-Leninist principles that were fundamentally at odds with Nazi fascism. Moorhouse explores this ideological paradox in depth, noting how both sides were willing to set aside their core principles in favor of short-term pragmatic gains. For Hitler, the pact was a temporary convenience. He was not interested in making long-term concessions to the Soviet Union, but saw the agreement as a means to buy time before launching his war of conquest in Western Europe. Stalin, on the other hand, believed that the pact would provide him with the breathing room needed to strengthen the Soviet Union's defenses, as he had little faith in Western democracies and viewed Nazi Germany as the more immediate threat. Both sides, however, recognized the value of deception. While they signed the pact publicly, they knew that their ultimate goals were incompatible. Stalin's distrust of the West, especially after the Munich Agreement of 1938, led him to view the Nazis as a necessary ally in the short term. The Nazi leadership, for its part, viewed the Soviet Union as a future enemy, but the pact ensured that Hitler could avoid the kind of two-front war that had plagued Germany during World War I. The fallout and long-term consequences. Moorhouse discusses the immediate impact of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, noting how it allowed both Hitler and Stalin to pursue their respective goals. The pact paved the way for the German invasion of Poland, which occurred on September 1939, and was followed by the Soviet invasion of Poland from the east on September 17th. The simultaneous invasions led to the swift collapse of Poland, which was effectively partitioned between the two powers. In the short term, the pact gave Hitler the strategic advantage he needed to launch his military campaigns in Western Europe without worrying about the Soviet Union. The Nazis were able to focus on their invasions of Denmark, Norway, France, and the Low Countries, all while the Soviet Union remained neutral. Similarly, Stalin used the time to consolidate his power in Eastern Europe and fortify Soviet defenses. However, the pact was never destined to last. Moorhouse argues that the ideological gulf between Nazism and communism was too great for the alliance to survive in the long term. Hitler's ultimate goal was to conquer the Soviet Union, and Stalin knew that the pact was only a temporary measure. In 1941, Hitler's invasion of the Soviet Union, known as Operation Barbarossa, shattered the pact and plunged the two countries into a brutal war. The Nazi-Soviet pact also had significant implications for the global balance of power. It allowed Hitler to consolidate his power in Europe and contributed to the early successes of the Nazi war machine. For Stalin, the pact was a means of securing time for Soviet preparations, but it also led to the loss of valuable human lives and territory, particularly in Poland and the Baltic states. The Soviet Union would suffer greatly in the war that followed, with millions of lives lost, including civilians who fell victim to Stalin's policies. The legacy of the pact. In the years following the end of World War II, the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact remained a contentious issue. The secret protocol dividing Eastern Europe was kept hidden for many years, and its revelation after the war raised significant questions about the extent to which the Soviet Union had been complicit in Nazi aggression. Moorhouse addresses these complexities, Solis acknowledging the role of both Hitler and Stalin in the pact's creation and the subsequent devastation it caused. The legacy of the pact has been the subject of extensive debate in the post-war era. Some historians have downplayed the significance of the pact, arguing that Stalin had no other choice but to make a pragmatic deal with Hitler. Others, however, see the pact as a betrayal of the principles of collective security and a tragic decision that sealed the fate of millions of people in Eastern Europe. The Devil's Alliance, Hitler's Pact with Stalin by Roger Moorhouse, is an essential contribution to the historical understanding of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. Moorhouse skillfully navigates the complex web of diplomatic, ideological, and military factors that led to the pact and explores the profound consequences it had on the course of World War II. The book provides a balanced and nuanced view of the motivations behind the pact and the individuals who shaped its outcome. Moorhouse's careful analysis and rich detail offer readers a deeper understanding of one of the most controversial and significant moments in 20th century history.